Hello, I guess I'm live now. This is Uncle Tommy Talks, a product from 50 Shades of Red podcast, created by Solomon Graham. Created also intervening with that is Cordell Eckstein. I hope Cordell didn't butcher your name. And my niece Naomi Menhaz. And they created 50 Shades of Red. It's sort of like a spinoff kind of thing. Um, I'm Uncle Tommy and Uncle Tommy Talks. Tonight, topic that I would love to discuss is the decline in the black community. Now, when people hear that right off the bat, they're going to think that you're going to get different responses. You're going to get, oh, he's a hater, or what does he have to say? But as you listen to this podcast, you'll see how I go into specific details on why, for instance, our communities look the way they do, who's to blame for all of this, why aren't we progressing as opposed to other communities? Um, why are we embracing the urban plight rather than correcting some of these mistakes that go on? Also, I have some research I did from some commentaries and also some um, columnists that are African American that kind of, I guess, how can I say it? Kind of have the same kind of view, the same kind of ideology that I have of why these situations are what they are. All right, so we just, I want to just really say hello to Leslie, and I want to let you know that, sorry, I missed you. Um, she had a good vacation. She's my jeweler, and she had a good vacation. And she was wondering why we didn't connect. So I want to let her know I'll make that up to her. Also, Olivia, who is another friend of mine, we have some business ventures. So, Olivia, let me take care of this, and I'll take care of that. And then Candy, I'll talk to you. Now, I have a lot of female friends. I just trust females. So that aside, let's get back to the topic: the decline in the black community. And always, I've had people approach me and they say, "Why? Why do you think there's a decline? The black community is declining?" Well, of course, my background's in psychology and statistics and human behavior with my degrees, and I keep on tab a lot of the stats that go on. And actually, and as I go through this, you'll hear from column from the from uh, columnists who have also done research, who have an idea of why, and it's interesting because it also touches political veins as well. I remember I was taking someone, I was out with someone, and we were having a similar discussion. I start off this way, and we're standing at Shelton Avenue in Philadelphia. And I said, look down the block and see, tell me what you see. And they said they see a lot of black patrons occupying, shopping, and doing what they do. And I said, how many black businesses do you see outside of barbershops and maybe the bar or whatever like that? And they said none. And I said, see, these are some of the things that we need to understand and we need to address in our communities. And why I'm touching on that is that I was in a before I turned vegan, I was in a Chinese store, and it's not to knock them. It's just that the food isn't really that healthy because you don't know what they're doing back there. And I got to be honest about it. It turns me off. Um, so I remember a kid came in and he just cursed the Chinese guy out for whatever reason. Maybe he was having a bad day. And but you're still where I'm going with all of this is that you're still paying them your money. You're still purchasing their product. In a lot of our urban communities, we find a lot of retailers that have immigrated here to this country, um, and very few black businesses. I came up in the late '60s, early '70s, and you had the mom and pop stores that were black owned. You had black businesses. Now I have statistics. here that will kind of have a clarity to that. Um, you don't see that too often anymore, and especially in urban areas. What you typically see now is you see the Indians with stores, and don't get me wrong, this isn't to disrespect any race or nationality. That's not what I'm doing. This is just going over statistics and letting the public know the ratio. Why if you go into any urban area, you see a lot of Chinese restaurants, and you'll see the corner store maybe occupied by someone Hispanic or something like that. But you see a lot of black patrons, but you don't see a lot of black businesses. Um, and from the 1960, and one of the statistics that I've drummed up, you just don't see that anymore like you did back then. You would have the mom and pop stores that were owned, they were owned and operated by had black ownership to it, and you kept those dollars in the community. Now you just really don't see that. Yet people often that are indigenous to those communities complain um, and keep feeding those businesses. And why I'm saying all of this, I guess, is that I think as a collective, if we would really trust each other enough to maybe embark on business as a collective, then maybe we can occupy those locations and have those stores in those communities where the dollar stay in the communities. Um, I remember watching. I was trying, and I really, really tried. I was at the lab at LaSalle, and I was trying to find a video that I was watching one time um, that had these kids on from urban areas. These black kids were on, and they were in a suburban area. As more, I guess it was more for the video than anything else. And as they were interviewed, they were talking about how clean it was in the suburbs as opposed to where they lived at. They said everything's clean, the streets are clean, there's no trash. Um, I brought that when I saw it when I first read the video, I saw it. I brought it to it. I was in the gym and I was talking to another person, and he was talking about how they don't come pick the trash up and do all of these things in our neighborhoods. And I said to him, well, being that you live there, why don't you start going from door to door, start getting volunteers, if you will, and ask them to it's sort of a beautification thing, for lack of a better expression. Just clean up the place. It doesn't hurt for someone to grab trash bags and a broom and whatever you need to do it. I've done it um, with communities. And especially with LaSalle, I volunteered to go in communities to help clean them up and things like that. And he was really upset at that suggestion. His attitude was, well, I'm a taxpayer, so they need to come out. And I said, well, who did you talk to your city council? Did you talk to anyone why this isn't happening? And he didn't. He really didn't have anything to say. If there's no proaction, then there's no action. Is where I'm standing with all of this. Um, if you're spouting off and you're not getting completely involved in the action, then what's the point? If there's not going to be any change, we're not going to contribute to the change of it. Um, Crime rates in those communities, the neighborhoods being dirty. You see a lot of people immigrate to this country, and because the property values in these neighborhoods are so low, they open up a lot of businesses, and that's the reason why you'll find a lot of people come over and open a mom and pop store or deli or pizza parlor or whatever it is. And because the neighborhoods are so low income, that's so low property value, they pop up everywhere. And what's happening is the black communities are sending their kids to college and things like that, um, by being customers to these locations. I'm not saying don't be a customer, but I'm saying when folks often wonder why you don't see these ventures with us behind the counter, unless we're hired by these people who come over and open these businesses to begin with. You don't see that often. I mean, as a collective, we may be too comfortable enough that we don't bond together. We don't allow ourselves to grow in these neighborhoods. We don't take pride in these neighborhoods. And I'm going to probably catch a lot of slack for that, but drive through one of the neighborhoods to see it for yourself. Um, One of the things I wrote down because I was taking some bullets is about I mean, let's put it this way: drug sales are going on everywhere. They go in the suburbs just like they do in urban areas. Um, they may not be as prevalent. You may not see the kids standing on the corner and being noisy and all of this. A lot of If it's in your community, I put it like this: I lived in a nice town, and we knew the guy, and the neighbors knew the guy on the corner. And I said, he's out there from, I would go off to school and he would be there. And I'd come home from school in the lab and whatever I was doing, he would still be there. And you could see him transacting and things like that. And what got me involved was some of the neighbors complained about how he could do this and how he could do that. And I said, how long have you been living here? And they were telling me, oh, yeah, I've been here for so many years. And I said, then you never were proactive about trying to remove this individual, if he's poisoning the community. Obviously he's so self-centered he doesn't care about anybody but himself, or he wouldn't do the actions that he's doing. um, and of course, always the out, as I'll put it, is that I don't want them causing me harm or this and that. And I said, collectively we can remove him. I said, if you're willing to do this. We did this with a few of the neighbors. Let's say there are 50 families on the block. Maybe five, including myself, decided to attack and approach the situation, and he complied. He had no problem with that. As we talked to him in a civil manner, and he left. Well, what's disturbing about this whole situation is that um, the other people wouldn't be compliant, but yet they wanted to bask in the fact that he decided to leave. Um, and we didn't see, far as I know, far as I was there for the time I actually lived there, we didn't see anybody else take his place or anything like that. Um, but it takes a community sometimes to bond and to extinguish these fires of abuse in our neighborhoods and things like that. Why complain if you're not going to be proactive enough to get involved? Um, let's see here. You know, it, I mean, it's all kinds of facets to this. Poor condition in neighborhoods. We mostly complain a lot more than we are more proactive in a resolution to try to resolve these issues, which makes me curious as to complain. I mean, complaining is one thing, proaction is another. If we don't like the conditions of our neighborhoods, we don't like what's going on with them, we need to take them over ourselves. We can't always wait and point fingers and hope that we get an intervention from the government all of the time, or some certain group will come in or something like that. We have to initiate that for ourselves. Um, I was doing some stats, and it was very interesting, the stuff that I found out um, about our conditions. Well, let me go here first because I looked up a guy named Walter Williams. He's a columnist, black columnist. His whole ideology about why there's a decline in the black community is that they're very weak family structures, and I have to agree with him. Um, Whether you like me saying that or whether you don't, the family structure. I'm an old schooler. The family structure has just fallen apart. Um, and he has some stats here. He says it's very weak family structure. He says the liberal left pushes their radical agenda against American values. And that was interesting. I didn't get to go too deep and in depth, but I will after this, just for my own personal research. Um, Walter Williams said this. Black columnist said this. Um, he said he again. I'll repeat it. He said the liberal left pushes their radical agenda against American values. I didn't get a whole lot of clarity to that statement of his. Um, but I know that when things aren't doesn't let's say it this way, when a government, when we assume the government aren't doesn't have it, isn't working, or and when I say government, I don't just mean the federal government. I mean you have city, state, and federal. So if city government in these communities aren't helping, or because we vote for them to be in these communities to represent our communities, if they're not helping, then sometimes you have to take the reins yourself. Find people, find a cause, find people that will agree with your cause, and try to find a resolution that way. We sometimes have to get off our own, stop sitting on our own hands, and try to establish a resolution when some if if I have a property and it's trash out front and the trash man didn't come, I'll go grab a bag, I'll go grab a dustpan, and I'll go grab a broom and clean up my property. And I and on top of that, can encourage others to do the same. Um, that way, it won't look as bad. It won't look as nasty. You don't invite pests, that kind of thing. I outside of this apartment building, I do it all the time. I on my way out, I'll see stuff and I'll grab a broom, dustpan, and I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you're disappointed in the conditions of things, and I live on a pretty good block, but if you're disappointed in certain things, then you have to be proactive enough to get involved in them and say that you care. Um, Walter Williams touched on a lot about college enrollment in the Black communities, which we are behind in. Um, I had a person chew my head off. You think because you have college degrees and this and this and this, and it's not that. It's just a choice made. The genesis of that is you have to instill education in your children. That, and I understand college is extremely expensive, but my I take pride with my nieces because they've earned scholarships and traveled the world and all kinds of things because my siblings, my sisters and brothers, instilled positive values into them, and that makes me extremely proud that um, they get scholarships to go to several places. It can happen. You have to instill that within your youth, so that way they can grow and prosper, and you can be a proud parent. Um, but I mean, he just was really, really anal about. Because I was talking to someone on a side conversation about, we were talking about academics, and for whatever reason, he just went off on me and decided, well, you think you're a better person because because you have degrees, and he just went into this whole dialogue about college, and it's simply a choice. I'm not saying you have to go. May not be everybody's twist. You can, there's vocational training. There's good blue collar jobs that if you're trained for. But percentage wise, I think it's something from 12 to 15%. I forgot what I wrote down here. 12 to 15% of of the people in those communities, in Black communities, get to go, or choose to go, or whatever, decide to go. Let's put it that way. As compared to the rest of society, I had the nation's population of African Americans at 13%, and I've got up the 2019 statistics, and it's at 17.9% of the nation's population is Black. 17.9, which still is quite small. Um, and these are stats uh, Mr. Williams had written down as a journalist and through his research, and a little bit is through my research. I have this. I ran this by somebody. It's gonna probably piss a few you viewers off. Ever go? I'll use Philadelphia. You ever go in like Temple Hospital or emergency room? And of course, they have different levels. They have security, and then you get to see the nurse, and then you finally get to see the doctor. Have you ever noticed there's a pattern in that? A lot of times, the security people are people of color. Um, and then as you get past the security and you need to be treated, triage or whatever it is, you'll see various nurses, and typically they're Caucasian or of another nationality. I'm not saying they're not African American nurses. My sister's a nurse. My sisters are nurses. And then normally you'll see a doctor. Um, More times than most, it'll be someone Caucasian or something like that. And you sit here and say, well, Katan, what are you talking about? Why are you going there? And I'm thinking, because I had a professor say this in a graduate program. He said sometimes we place ourselves in positions, and he wasn't trying to be insulting. He was making a generalization that if you do this, if you see, and it allowed me to open my eyes a little bit that not everybody's qualified, not everybody's educated to do all of the to get to the doctor level, and it was eye opening. And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, all of the hospitals, all of the surgeries I've had, and I've had many, quite a few. You would see the same kind of setup. You would go to. I'm not saying there's outliers to everything. There's exceptions to everything. But quite often you would see you walk into you need to be treated. You walk in there, and of course security has to check you out. Mostly, security is mostly black in this city. I don't know how it is working with other cities. Then you get your nursing staff, which could be black, could be whatever. It could be any race. But typically, and most often, your physicians. I'm not saying you don't have black physicians, obviously, but most often you'll see somebody Caucasian. But if you visit as many ERs as I have, you'll see that often. You'll see that pattern. Reason for that being is that the education simply isn't the qualifications, and it's not knocking any jobs or anything like that, but for our people, the qualifications are this is what you can do. You have a clean record, but you don't have an education. Um, these are the jobs that's open for you. Um, you get a lot of people who, when they get to a certain plateau, will leave their neighborhoods, especially with entertainers, rappers, singers, whoever. One of Do you often you see them not on social media, but do you often see them or hear about them returning to their communities to try to, if nothing else, I'm not saying they got to throw money in the air, but do you often see them giving back to those communities once they're out of them? Not too often, or at least making some sort of talk to inspire those who are still in these communities. Or you don't see that often. At least I don't. Maybe I don't watch enough television to do it, and I really don't watch enough television. I don't find it appealing. But you don't see you don't see people reaching back often as you would think. Once they've and they don't live in those communities anymore. And of course, the celebrity is going to say, well, how can I could get robbed and I can't walk down the street and all of these things. But I think they take on a demeanor. This is where my behavioral studies kicks in. I think they take on a demeanor that they are of some supremacy that they can at least inspire those communities to come back and it's like just like when a football team like the Patriots won the Super Bowl and they put on parade. Entertainers, I'm saying you got to put on a parade, but you can put on an event where that your presence is known and that you're from that community and it's instilling hope. But you get some who run off and just they keep running. They go off and wash their hands of it. Um, because sometimes we need inspiring. Okay, college enrollment and qualifications for high paying jobs. Sometimes we don't fill those. If you have to, God willing, I hope no one watching this has to go to a an ER for anything or your health declines and things like that. But if you do, just kind of take notice of the stages that you go through with the security, with the nursing staff, and then with the physicians, and just notice um, who what type of demographic is doing these jobs. It's just an interesting thing. It's not a knock on anyone. It's just an interesting statistic. Um, with Mr. Williams, he had some stats too because he's an older guy like myself, so he's reflecting from the '60s. In the '60s, he was stating that 20% of black kids were raised in single parenting, which is I think it's a very sensitive issue. Um, We cannot abandon our beautiful black women. We just can't as males. Um, People say, well, you don't have any kids. It's easy for you to say. But the point but excuse me, I got to take a drink of this coffee. It's really good. But the point is that we can't abandon our responsibilities, especially as males. Um, 1960 was 20%. And from what I understand, 50 years later, it went up to 80%, which is 8 out of every 10 are raised in kids are raised in single parent families. Um, where I'm going with this is that I think as a collective, we need to make better choices. And there's some ambiguity with that, not just better choices of family planning, but better choices of mates. Better, I get it. You're with someone, you're not going to know if they're just going to one day walk out of the door. And I'm not saying that we're the only demographic that this happens to, but we're the ones that it happens to more often in this country. So we need to be more responsible in planning because there are certain aspects, biologically speaking and behaviorally speaking, that if you're a single parent, say a male with a daughter, there's certain things and certain aspects and certain hormones that you may not, as a man, understand. And I've heard men say I had to ask women about these things. There's no shame in that. It's not. I'm not here to disrespect. I'm just saying this is what I've heard. This is what I heard in talks and in group sessions and things like that. And the reverse is also true. There's certain things that a woman can't understand about the male growing up through adolescence and things like that that they can't teach or they can't relate to or and all of that. Um, which is interesting because you hear, especially in music, you hear because this guy Williams was talking about in music how the rap game influences a lot of communities, and he didn't go into detail as to why, but I guess when you don't have a positive male role model that's influential, and you listen to some lyrics and they're telling you, they're selling records, so they're gonna hype their hood or they're going to represent this and this, and you got that young urban male, black male, listening to that and embracing it, and sometimes it can give you negative thoughts or discriminatory thoughts, especially against women, and it's a cycle. You hear the word bitches, hoes, and all of this. I mean, I know a lot of black guys would kill if someone called their mother those names. You know, So why would you use that against another female? We got to respect our own. We got to respect women in this country. We have to stop looking at through the eyes of thinking that they're bitches, hoes, and all of these other things because they're queens and they need to be respected accordingly. It's really that simple. Um, I know some of these artists want to sell records and they want to sound tough on the mic and all this stuff, but if it starts with us, we got to stop degrading ourselves. We got to throw the bitch word out and the nigger word out and all of these things. We got to get rid of that. We just got to stop it. It is nothing. It is nothing um, cool about expressing ourselves as that. Um, when we start adapting those things, we conform. And when we conform, we surrender. We surrender everything. And our communities stay the way they look. They stay filthy. Um, they stay violent. Um, for dietary purposes, you have, I mean, Michael Eric Dyson is another author, another African American author. My nephew blessed me with his works. I didn't even know anything about him for years. My nephew John came at me with some books on. He was following him. He's a very smart nephew. He was following Michael Eric Dyson. So of course he gave me as a gift one of his books. He's a professor, I think, at Harvard, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and his whole discussion was about the dietary habits of African American people. And he was talking about how we go and grab the 20-piece bucket of chicken for $10. Socioeconomically speaking, I understand why. because it makes sense. You can feed a family for 20, $30, and you can stretch your budget. But what he was trying to say is we adapt that as a staple, and we keep going back to it, and you'll see obesity rates rise among our community. Why that's so concerning? I was extremely heavy before I lost 70 pounds. Why that's so concerning is because of the high blood pressure, the diabetes, and being African American, we have to keep our eyes on those conditions. We can't ignore that. So if we toss our dietary practices to the wind, and we're not trying to teach our kids to eat right, and we're not eating right. I mean, you got to lead by example. If you don't eat right, and your kids aren't going to eat right, and then you wonder why you have these obese kids running around, or these. I've seen teenagers way more than I do, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a pretty heavy kid. 14, 15 years old, and conditions come down the line, and then the argument is healthcare. Oh, I got to have this, I got to have that. It starts with the diet. I mentioned in my last podcast how I have a heart condition, and that really started the ball rolling with weight loss, dietary habits, being a vegan, all of these things. And I needed to live better lifestyle if I wanted to stay here. And I'm not saying that's something as you viewers have to incorporate, but you need to consider a lifestyle that's healthy, um, that's fruitful, regardless of where you live at. But why I'm hitting on this is that in these communities, in our African American communities, in our Black communities, um, it tends to be more escalated. We tend to be at the top of the list of people who have these conditions. You're, I'm sure some of you people of color that's watching this podcast have been to doctors that said because you're black, you're gonna have a higher rate of heart disease or whatever it is, just because of gender. If we already have the odds against us, what we need to do is be proactive enough to eat better and fight those odds. Don't wait till it's too late and the condition escalates, and now we're on all kinds of medications and things like that. I can't tell you the list of medications I was on until I decided to take control. And if I can do that just with my own health and well-being, we can do that with everything in our communities. We can take control of our neighborhoods. We can take control of how clean they are. We can be more proactive of how safe they can be. Um, but we have to be more proactive in doing it. And in the genesis of it, it starts at the home. It starts with us. Um, as this columnist Williams was stating, I'm gonna read some more statistics. 75% of Black kids are reared to unwed mothers, and I knew that. As a matter of fact, I wrote that as an undergrad, about because I did a paper on a Black community back then, and yeah, 3 out of 4 are unwed, and that's been a statistic that's been hanging over for a long time. I can't answer why that is. I just know it is the highest rate among any race in this country. It says you have more Black women that are unwed that have kids. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying any. I'm not knocking that. But in thinking of yourself, you have to think of your children. You have to think of. You have to be practical enough to think of what direction you're going into, because you got at least 18 years of responsibility. I ran into a guy, and I probably shared this on either on a Thursday 50 show or on one of my own podcasts, about a guy who boasted and bragged about having 13 kids with 7 women and not taking care of any of them. Well, he didn't brag about the not taking care of part. I kind of filled in that gap. I said, "Well, are you a responsible parent? Are you taking care of your children and providing?" And they're all right, is what he barked at me, and I said, "Wow, are you in touch with him?" Because he brought the subject matter up, and as we exchanged dialogue, he got really said, he said, "Well, how many kids do you have?" And I said, "Well, I don't have any, um, for various reasons, by choice." He said, "Well, you don't know what it's like to be a parent." And I said, "Well, obviously you do. You have 13 kids, but seven of them women you didn't marry, so now they have to struggle and provide and do the parenting for do twice the parenting. How does that make you feel? Here you are selling. What was he doing at that point? He was selling DVDs or something. I don't know. But where I'm going with all of that is that we need to plan first. We need to. Kids don't need to be placed in a position that is not advantageous. I get it. I know sometimes the company moves and your mate loses the job or something like that, or something goes wrong at work. I understand all of these things happening, but as a collective, if we start out thinking we can handle this just by ourselves, it becomes hard on our youth. And then you pass that youth off, and then they do the same thing with their youth, and so forth and so on. And it just keeps the snowball keeps rolling. Um, what else did I write down here? Because that was just some interesting things from a columnist, black columnist, who was saying, there's no structure in the communities. Remember, I lived in the area where you had to go to church and things like that. Not that you understood everything about church, but the environment's everything, and I've preached that till I was blue in the face. The environment's everything. At least it's a stimulus. I'm not saying that you got to stick a knife at your kid's throat and make them go to church, but parents are more lenient. Kids just do whatever, you know. Just as long as they come home, everything's everything. And I know times change, different generations, but also, but the principles can still be solid. The the respect can still be solid. Um, what did I write here? Yeah, I was right. I was writing about snitching on drug dealers. There was there was a show one time with a guy on it, and a black guy and he was on Faceline or something like that. I forgot the name of the show. But he would, if you sold dope on his block, he slammed you for that. I mean, he just, he was really the lookout. But his whole message was, it was just one person. And when I heard his interview, he said, I went door to door. I try to get people involved. And it seemed like no one cares. And that literally brought a tear to my eye that someone would not care enough to protect their own because it's your community. You live there. It's yours. When you buy a house or rent a property or apartment or a room or whatever it is, it's your community. Get proactive in it. Here's a statistic that I got from some of the research I was doing. That it let me see what it is. It says the economic crisis. Because sometimes we point the finger at socioeconomics and things like that. Um, it's 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 Trump's fault or it's this senator's fault or whatever. He doesn't do this, but we don't take our own survey. And it said here that economic crisis bill will weaken black communities by the year 2053, and it'll be down to zero. So if we're struggling now, it'll be the haves and the have-nots, and it'll be down to zero by 2053 as predicted by current statistics that's going on as I'm talking right now. And that was a very interesting piece. What I'm saying here is that the economic crisis in our neighborhood, if it's not good now, if it's at a certain percentage, I think it's at 17%. I'm not exactly sure. I got to relook up my notes, but it'll be by zero economically. As other words are saying, those communities won't have any dollars. They'll be at the mercy of whatever the government shells out or whatever they're doing or whatnot. Because they're not building on their communities. It'll be like the Badlands. It'll be communities that people will avoid, not want to raise kids in. That'll get lost or get bought out by even another demographic that may turn into something prospering. And that was a really interesting stat. 2053. And yeah, people say, well, yeah, that's 2053 and it's 2019. Years go by very fast, very quickly before you know. I may not be here. My beautiful nieces and nephews will, and they're going to be faced with this crisis. They're in good places now, because I got my siblings take care of their own. And I gotta, for me to be the only sibling without children, watching what my brothers and sisters did with my nieces and nephews is an absolute blessing. They were very proactive parents. They were very, but we were taught those values for that. Even if I had become a father, I would still instill those values that they're teaching my nieces and nephews now, which makes them great as they are. And I know people are looking at this and saying, "Well, yeah, they're your nieces and nephews." You're going to say that? No, they are outstanding. I post their grades. You know, one of my nieces traveled the country and traveled the world. I got another one who brought me into this podcast, Snafu, and she's doing wonderful things with a wonderful life. And it's warming the heart to see that. And I'm thinking, why can't more communities do this for their children? You hate to see kids wasting time on a corner or standing around. You hate to see adults do it. You can drive through certain communities all day. That's where they are. They're standing on the corner, they're perched. You know, you don't. I'm not saying they're dealers and all these other things, but I notice a lot of time wasted. We only get this life once. The chance of wasting time that's so valuable, we cannot get it back. So we need to at least make the attempt. I'm not saying everything's going to be a success. I'm not saying you're going to have a whole bunch of degrees. I'm not saying you're going to have this and have that. But if you make the attempt, at least you know you tried. It's real simple. We got to collectively gather our communities together and thwart the oppression that's in them, the squalor and the filth that's in them, and the people who contaminate. Because let me tell you, dealers don't give a damn about nobody but themselves. And if you know the kids slinging and this and that, and normally it's mostly males, um, and you're uncomfortable about that, don't wait till they start shooting at each other. Gather group community groups. Go see your representatives. You see their offices pretty much on every corner or something. Go see them and tell them you're dissatisfied with this. Make some noise. You know, living in fear is the worst thing to do. You might as well live in jail. Um, Incarceration issues. That's one thing I wrote down. And also, before I go there, the columnist Williams was talking about the dysfunction among the Black community families. Um, I don't know if I agree to that because that's more opinionated. I'm not saying that every Black family has dysfunction. I think families, Black, white, Asian, whatever, if it's dysfunctional, it has no it has no race code. Um, It's what it is. If you got a screwed up family, you just got a screwed up family. It's not making fun of that. It's just there's always a hiccup in everybody's family. So when I read that and the author was kind of elaborating on that, and I'm thinking, well, you're a Black guy. Was your, he did. I'm thinking, was your family dysfunctional? Um, because because you're a columnist or a doctor or a lawyer, it doesn't mean you didn't come from dysfunction. You know, I you can look online. You see a lot of criminalistic professionals that are now doing life sentences, and they were this prominent person. And then when you dug deeper, oh, they came from dysfunction. But they're smart enough to earn degrees or whatever they needed to get to. But the dysfunction lingered in, and lo and behold, they're now incarcerated. Um, which hits me with the incarceration and how it hurts Black families. Because one thing Williams was talking about was that, um, with the young men and primarily in prison, percentage is high among males going to prison. It's just what it is. Um, how they have families, and quite honestly, and I dug deeper. I didn't dig it via Williams. I dug deeper on my own. It's that, yeah, most Black incarcerated males have children and girlfriends or baby mamas or even wives. And his whole disposition was, well, how can you take care of someone when you're incarcerated? And yeah, it's just simple. You can't. Um, and you get various. I've visited study groups. You get various reasons why these young men do this. And I get it. They want to try to make a buck here and there. Sometimes when you get self-centered, you don't consider the repercussions that will that will ripple towards your family if you're incarcerated. And even as the female, I would think that if you know you have your mate is into something that is just that could compromise his freedom, and you have children with this mate, that you might want to, you can't make them do anything, but you might want to either pull out of it or you might want to try to encourage them to do something better. I understand the job markets and all of these excuses I used to hear in group sessions as an intern. Um, but see, that's where it comes down to the genesis of all of this because upon making this child, you need to make a decision. You need to say, am I in the right place in my life to start a family? Falling in love is one thing. Bringing in children, something is a whole different planet because it's so much responsibility to that. And you're talking to a person without kids, but I'm watching my siblings and watching other people and listening to and researching and doing all this stuff and so many credit hours and things towards degrees. I've heard a lot of I've heard a lot. It is not an easy task. And if you're not if I get it. Hiccups come along. But if you give your child the best upbringing that you possibly can, is where I'm going with all of that. But if you start out doing your best and trying to be your best, and you got good environment, good nurturing, um, um, pretty decent financial stability, your odds are, and I'm not saying that that's going to provide a good child, but your odds are greater than those in squalor and saying, hey, now I'm pregnant, and the guy leaves, and now you're struggling. You got to be the parent for two. You got to be two parents, and this is where these communities fall off. Like the stats say, three out of four women aren't married. Make, get married. Make him marry you. If he tells you everything you want to hear, say, okay, go get the ring. Put it on my finger. You, the black queens are worth that, in my opinion. You know, stop letting men just do whatever, and then they're off to the ex girlfriend or whatever situation they're off to. It isn't that much love in the world that you would put at risk any child or child to be, that you would just believe, oh, I trust him, and then you're you're raising this kid by yourself and you're struggling and you're angry and and he's gone or whatever he's doing or he doesn't want to see the kid or even in some instances deny the kid. That's why you see so many circus TV shows talking about DNA testing. And if you watch them, and I don't, but the times I have seen them, the demographic is mostly African American, and they get on and they want to run off the stage in tears and all this stuff. I mean, it's just reinforcing irresponsibility, and we need to stop it. We should stop going on the shows. I had a guy in an interview in a session once that I was interning, and he went on one of those shows. They pay you five. I guess it's the money. He said according to him, he was paid $5,000 to go on the show, and was paid another five after the show. So I guess that's a stimulus for anybody to go and embarrass themselves on national TV to say that I'm an irresponsible person, I got pregnant, or I'm not the daddy, and all this other craziness on the show. Um, so they go on the show, they get the money, and again, it's all about them. You know, there's a child in the middle of all this. There's an umbilical cord to this thing. Um, we got to be as as a community and as parents more responsible. Um, One thing I want to touch on also is that we got to stop holding other races, other cultures responsible for our own shortcomings. We have to stop it. We have to stop pointing the finger. The white guy, he gets the advantage. And if you think like that, then just step your game up. Stop pointing the finger. Stop thinking that it's someone else's fault for your shortcomings. Um, The genesis of it is you have to make your decision on where your life's going. I'm not saying it's going to go that way. God forbid I've made a lot of mistakes, but I don't drag families into them. I don't have children dragging along to say, okay, I messed up, because the ripples are going to happen to your kids. You have to make a decision. I get it. You with someone you would a partner and it's wonderful and it's all this and that. But you also have to talk it through and see if this is the right person for your life. That's why the divorce, what's the divorce rate overall? 56%. Over half get divorced. The black divorce rate's even higher. It's something like 64.7%, according to 2019 stats. And that's a lot. That's 6 out of every 10 people, 10 couples getting divorced. And then on top of that, you have the 3 out of 4 are single, and all this stuff. I'm not saying divorce doesn't happen, but I agree with Williams on one aspect: is the family structure is just really depleting in our communities, and we're sending kids out in these communities. They're getting killed. They're going to prison and all kinds of things. And we wait until it's too late to try to instill values in them. It starts at what Uncle Tommy thinks. It starts at the home. It starts the moment you decide I'm going to be a parent and all of these things, and I'm going to live in this community even. Um, it starts there. Environment's everything. I'm not saying everybody's going to move to the burbs and all this stuff. I'm just saying you're in a community, reinforced communities. There are people of lower income, of different races and cultures. Hispanic communities, they're more. And it's not, and people are going to probably chew me out for this. I've been in some Spanish communities, and it's so family oriented. They really look out for each other, and you don't have to believe that, but I've been down in those communities. I've got friends in those communities, and they're really, those Hispanic people are really, they bond. They don't let you just fall off and just fall. Asian community, Chinatown, go down there, they bond. They're all about business. You know, why are we cutting our own throats? Indian communities, they're all about, they support each other. You don't see them often on the news in a negative light. So you got to ask ourselves, what are we doing so wrong? Why are we leading so many statistics in the negative columns all the time? Why us? Why are we doing it? What makes us do this? You know, and we have to go back and instill values and principles in our families, in our communities. If everybody just does it, I'm not saying it's going to be an overnight transition, but if we do it and we consider it, we're less likely to raise felons, and we want to raise engineers and doctors and attorneys and psychologists. you know, I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. And like my niece, lawyers and people that work for this, like my other niece works for this, wants to work for the government, and they have a voice in the community, and they're proud. And like my other niece is military, and my nephews, they want to embark on positive things. They don't have to worry about about life later, because sees for my siblings they've planted in. My brothers and sisters have done excellent work with my nieces and nephews, and they don't suffer. They don't have to. They're in good neighborhoods and everything. So, but there were choices made that were positive. They didn't just up and do these things, and that's what I'm saying. You have to lay foundation for families. You have to lay foundation for communities. You know, it's it. You, any urban community can be a great community if everybody as a collective bond together and bring it together, and and we could save them. I'm so tired of watching lives get lost, hearing about shootings in some parts of the city and in other urban areas. We've become so conditioned of certain places and shooting. Oh yeah, well that's Southwest Philly. Yeah, they shoot down there. Um, that we really need to try to figure out how we can suppress that, how we can get that element, and start. The genesis starts in the homes. If you think your child's doing wrong, have conversations with that child. Um, Sit down with them. Try to be a two-parent family. I'm not saying, and men, stop leaving these beautiful black women. Stop walking out on them. It's these statistics don't lie. We're walking out on our females. Stop doing it. I mean, if you don't want her, give her to somebody that's gonna appreciate her. Period. It's that simple. Don't. Don't start a family with her and then you take off into the broad blue yonder because you're not man enough to hold it. And they want to be, and I'll wrap this up with this. They want to be considered men, but they won't be responsible men. I'm a man. What? But you don't take care of your responsibilities. And I'm gonna get knocked for it by people saying, "Well, you're not a father." Well, if I were, it's nothing on this earth I wouldn't do for a child I would bring into this world legally. I wouldn't do. I wouldn't hurt other communities and do stuff, but I would work hard and I would be a responsible parent, and that's what it takes. Because I'm sure our queens had enough of the nonsense from men. Um, so with that, I'm going to wrap up this hour. It went quite fast. There was some other things I wanted to touch on, but maybe for another Tuesday. I wish you all well, good health. God bless you all. And I need to start saying that more because trust me, and it's not to knock the agnostic or the atheist. It's just that I'm a spiritually blessed guy, and sometimes I don't appreciate that, and I need to address that when I speak, because we all need a helping hand. So this is Uncle Tommy Talks. Until next Tuesday, stay well. Hope your week goes great, and God bless you all. Thank you.